Hi everyone, it's Nicole here from Mama Elephant, and today I have a card featuring the new Freestyle Florals stamp set and dies. And for my card, I am creating some watercolor florals. To start, I'm going to stamp some of these florals from the Freestyle Florals stamp set, as well as some of the leaves on some Tim Holtz watercolor paper using Versamark ink, and then I'm going to sprinkle on some white embossing powder. I'm going to sprinkle the embossing powder kind of as I go, simply so that I can see where I have stamped already and I leave enough room in between the images for the dies, but then I will heat them all at the same time. I'm going to do all of the stamping that I can at once here and then heat emboss it and then apply some watercoloring using the Tim Holtz Distress inks and a little bit of water. I really love the colors of the Distress inks, and it's a really quick and easy way to get some really pretty watercolored effects. Once I have all of those stamped and embossed, I'm going to simply take my ink pads and kind of press them there onto a craft mat. I'm using the Seedless Preserves and Picked Raspberry here. Use a little water, get my paintbrush nice and wet, dip it into that ink, and then just kind of dab it onto the design. Because I embossed that, the embossed lines are going to hold that watercolor in, as long as I don't get it too terribly wet, into the area of the stamped image. So I'm kind of just taking my paintbrush and moving it around. I'm applied the Picked Raspberry first, and then kind of a little bit of the Seedless Preserves, and then mixed them together a little bit with a little additional water to kind of get it flowing a little bit so it didn't have such a distinct definition of color. I'm going to do both of these kind of the same. This one will end up being a little bit lighter because it's watered down a little bit more. I love the imperfection of watercoloring this way. You can pull in additional color. You can see I'm picking up a little bit of the Seedless Preserves there and pulling it in from the edge of the floral to darken up those edges right there. Pounce off my paintbrush and then clean up my craft mat. And I have applied a little bit of the Shabby Shutters and then Mowed Lawn Distress inks to my craft mat to color in the leaves. Now, the Shabby Shutters ended up being, I thought, a little too light. Even though I tried to kind of keep that variation in color on that one leaf, I decided I didn't particularly like the Shabby Shutters quite so much, so I ended up going back over my leaves and really mostly keeping to the Mowed Lawn. It's a little bit darker and deeper, and I thought it went with the florals in this card a little bit better. Make sure I fill all of those in. I am using that acrylic block to help hold down my watercolor paper so that it doesn't bow up in the middle because of the water. I could have probably taped it to a board or something, but I didn't. I was kind of doing this quickly and didn't take the time to do that. These were some small images that I ended up not using on my card just because they were too small. I think that they would look better with a different technique, but I did color them in case you were wondering what those were, but in the final card I didn't use those. I'm going to use a little Barn Door now and Wild Honey Distress inks to color one of the other flowers. Going to use that Wild Honey in the center, and I'm just kind of pouncing it out there or pulling it from the center, and then I'm going to pull in the Barn Door, and I ended up getting some of that Barn Door in the center of my flower, so I kind of tried to dab a little bit of that out. I'll go back over it here in a little bit with a little bit more Wild Honey, so it's definitely a little more orangey there in the center, since I accidentally got that red there into where I didn't really want it. And I love that some of the flower petals are much darker than others simply because of the saturation in color or how much ink I had on my paintbrush compared to water or whatever. I think it really gives a really pretty soft effect and a much more natural effect where all of the leaves are not exactly the same. So there is another flower. Now for my final one here on this sheet, I am going to color it with a little bit of the Peacock Feathers Distress ink. I'm going to move my acrylic block there. I'm using a little shabby shutters here and the peacock feathers. Use the shabby shutters kind of in the middle. There's not a real definite middle for this particular flower, so I think the shabby shutters again kind of got covered up, which is fine. It's not really a big deal. And then I'm taking that peacock feathers and pulling it in for each of these flower petals. Now, if you wanted to speed this up, you could definitely hit this with a heat gun to dry the ink a little bit quicker. I really prefer to let my watercolors or watercolored images sit and air dry, and it doesn't take too terribly long. I let this sit maybe 10 or 15 minutes while I was doing something else, and then I came back to die cut these. So it just kind of depends on how big of a hurry you're in or what look you like better. But I did let mine air dry. Now I am taking some greetings from the brand new Bear Hugs stamp set and stamping them with the Dark Storm pigment ink from Mama Elephant. This is just on a white card base. This is going to be the base for my card. I stamped the thank you and then the additional little greeting underneath it. I did that while my flowers were drying. Once they were dry, I took the coordinating dies and attached them with a little bit of Post-it tape and ran them through my Big Shot die cutting machine. Now, some of these florals are a little tricky. What I like to do is just kind of spin them around until you can tell that that's the way it goes, and then secure the die over the stamped image and then die cut them. I'm using some glue dots to just add one little bit of adhesive, mostly to the centers of the florals or the leaves, simply so that I can tuck my flowers kind of in and around each other. I'm building it as I go, and if I need to secure anything once I have the design or all of the elements laid out, I can go back and do that. But the one little dot of glue makes it much easier to be able to manipulate and tuck flowers underneath and things like that. Now, there are many more florals shown in the finished card than what I actually made, if that makes sense. And I'm going to show you how I did that. Because some of these hang off the edge of the card, I like to salvage those little pieces, and it can actually make it look like you have more florals by using those little leftovers along the edges. So I'm going to take my scissors and cut off any of those excess pieces. There's a good one right there. And that will make a great additional little flower along the left-hand side of the card. Now here's where I went in and added a little bit more adhesive to some areas where it needed it. I'll take that larger of the two that I've cut off there, and I'm going to tuck it right along the side, and it just gives the illusion of an additional flower, which I love. Now I needed one more flower, so I did have to watercolor another one, plus I watercolored a few additional leaves because I felt like it needed a little bit more greenery. Go ahead and do the same thing here. Snip off all that excess. I'm going to take what I just cut off and tuck that along the bottom edge now. That way you get the most use out of all the pieces that you have watercolored and die cut. Go ahead and finish tucking in another leaf here. And then I'm going to take a 1/2 inch corner rounder and round all 4 corners of the card. Kind of helps soften all of the edges, plus it gives a really nice finished look, I think. I hope you've enjoyed this video showcasing the brand new Mama Elephant Freestyle Florals stamp set and dies. The supplies I've used are listed and linked below the video on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.